This story is titled, My Parents Demanded I Cancel My Wedding for Golden Siblings Feelings. Now they're not invited, but still trying to destroy everything. Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer, 28, and I've been living in San Diego for the past few years. I'm engaged to Daniel, who's 29, and we've been together for 5 wonderful years. He's literally my best friend and the most supportive person I've ever known. Last April, Daniel proposed to me during a quiet weekend getaway. It was the happiest moment of my life, or so I thought. I had no idea what was about to happen next. Enter my half-sister Lisa, who's 23. She's my mom's daughter with my stepdad Robert, who married my mom when I was 6 years old. Lisa and I grew up together, but we never really clicked. We were more like strangers who happened to be related than actual sisters. She's always been weirdly competitive with me, something that started when we were just kids. She would throw full-blown tantrums if I got better grades, or if relatives said anything nice about me. This competitive behavior only got worse as we got older. I went to university on a scholarship, while Lisa didn't pursue higher education at all. I've been in a stable, loving relationship with Daniel for years, while Lisa has jumped from one messy relationship to another. Now that I'm engaged, she's acting like my happiness is some kind of personal attack against her. After Daniel proposed last April, we decided on a March wedding. We wanted something cozy and intimate, planning for about 65 guests. It felt perfect for us, and I was excited to start planning. I thought my family would be happy for me too. Boy, was I wrong. When I called my mom with the news of our engagement, the first thing she said was, "Oh, Lisa's not going to like this." I thought she was joking, but she was completely serious. Apparently, my engagement would hurt Lisa's feelings because she was single and trying to figure things out. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a weird comment that wouldn't amount to anything. A few weeks later, Lisa announced she was getting married to some guy she'd known for only 2 months. I tried not to judge, but something felt off about the whole situation. Lisa has always been impulsive. But marriage after just 2 months? To a guy none of us even knew? Still, I kept my mouth shut. I figured it was her life, her decision, and not my business. Fast forward to August, and Lisa's whirlwind marriage imploded spectacularly. Her husband Mark had cheated on her with her best friend just 2 months after their wedding. She filed for divorce immediately, and the whole situation turned into a complete mess. I felt genuinely bad for her and tried to be supportive, but all I got in return was the cold shoulder. It felt like she was angry at me, though I couldn't figure out why. Then it hit me. She didn't want my support. She wanted someone to blame. I eventually pieced it together. Lisa thinks I somehow triggered her rushed marriage, as if my engagement was some kind of challenge that she needed to win. When her marriage fell apart, I guess it was easier for her to resent me than to take responsibility for her own choices. By the time October rolled around, things were incredibly tense between us. Lisa and I hadn't spoken since her divorce, and my mom was acting strange too. Every time I brought up wedding planning, she'd get quiet or change the subject. It felt like she was deliberately avoiding the topic. I didn't push it at first, figuring she just didn't want to talk about weddings because of Lisa's situation. I should have seen the warning signs. Nothing prepares you for being guilt-tripped about your own wedding. I thought wedding stress would revolve around normal issues like budget or logistics, not my own family turning it into some twisted competition. But here we are. Mid-November finally arrived, and Daniel and I sent out our wedding invitations. I was incredibly excited. It finally felt like everything was coming together after months of planning. Unfortunately, that excitement didn't last long. Just 2 days after sending out the invitations, I got a call from my mom. This was unusual because she rarely calls, typically just sending a text once a month or so. I answered anyway, thinking that maybe she wanted to talk about the wedding plans. I should have known better. The conversation started innocently enough. Mom asked how I was doing, how Daniel was, and then casually dropped the bomb. "So you're really going through with the wedding?" At first, I thought she was just confirming the date. "Yeah, of course everything's set," I told her. I explained that we'd booked the venue, the caterer, and the flowers, and most of it was already paid for. That's when she sighed. Not a normal sigh, but one of those loud, dramatic sighs that screams, "You're ruining someone's life!" "Well," she said, dragging out the word like she was about to drop some life-changing wisdom, "I've been thinking about Lisa, and I really think you should reconsider." I paused, completely confused. "Reconsider what?" She hesitated, as if gearing up for a big speech, then continued, "I just don't think it's a good time for a wedding, Jennifer. Lisa's still so heartbroken from the divorce. Having a big celebration like this so soon after everything she's been through, It feels a little insensitive. I honestly thought I had misheard her. Wait, you think I should cancel my wedding for Lisa? I asked incredulously. Well, yes, she replied, like it was the most reasonable request in the world. She's been through so much, and seeing you get married so soon after her divorce is going to hurt her a lot. I was absolutely stunned. I didn't even know how to respond at first. Mom, we've been planning this wedding for almost a year, I finally said. The venue's booked. The deposits are paid. How can you ask me to just cancel it? She didn't miss a beat. You could always do something small. A church ceremony maybe, just immediate family. That way you still get married, but it's not such a big production. You wouldn't be flaunting it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, this isn't about flaunting anything, I protested. It's about celebrating my relationship with Daniel. We've been together for 5 years. This is our day. She sighed again, even heavier this time. I just think if you really loved your sister, you'd do this for her. She needs time to heal, and a big wedding is going to make things worse for her. At this point, I was furious, though I tried to stay calm. Mom, I get that Lisa's going through a rough time, but this has nothing to do with her. Daniel and I have been planning this for so long. It's not fair to ask us to change everything because of her choices. She didn't like that. Her choices, Jennifer, she snapped. She didn't choose to have her husband cheat on her. She didn't choose to have her life fall apart. Yeah, but she did choose to marry a guy she barely knew after 2 months, I shot back. That was the wrong thing to say. Mom completely lost it. She accused me of being cruel and selfish, of not understanding what Lisa had been through. She even threw in a classic, I thought I raised you better than this. At that point, I couldn't deal anymore. Mom, I'm not canceling my wedding. End of discussion, I said firmly before hanging up. I was shaking with anger as I immediately called Daniel and told him everything. He was just as baffled as I was. Who asks their own daughter to cancel her wedding for someone else's divorce? He said, echoing my disbelief. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but of course it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, Mom doubled down on her campaign to guilt me into canceling or scaling down the wedding. She'd call me every few days, always with some variation of the same argument. Lisa's heartbroken. You're being insensitive. A small wedding would mean so much to the family. At one point, she even tried to rope Daniel in. She called him directly and said, You're such a thoughtful person, Daniel. I know you'll understand why this is important for Lisa. Thankfully, he shut that down immediately, telling her we were sticking to our original plans. But then Lisa got involved. She started texting me, making passive-aggressive comments like, Must be nice to have everything go perfectly for you. And, Don't you think it's a little soon for a big celebration? She even brought up the date. March feels like such a weird time for a wedding. Are you sure you didn't pick it to rub it in my face? Rub it in her face? I couldn't believe the audacity. I tried ignoring her at first, but she just kept escalating. She started calling me, leaving these long, guilt-trippy voicemails about how hard it was for her to even think about weddings and how my insensitivity was making her healing process so much harder. The worst part was how Mom and Lisa seemed to feed off each other. Mom would call and say, Lisa was crying all night thinking about your wedding. Then Lisa would text me the next day with, Mom's so upset about how you're handling this. It was exhausting. I was at my breaking point. I couldn't believe how far they were willing to go to make my wedding about them. I knew I had to draw a line, but I wasn't sure how yet. This was the moment I realized just how toxic their behavior was. This wasn't about Lisa's divorce or her feelings. It was about control. They wanted me to put my life on hold to cater to their insecurities. I was done letting them dictate my happiness. By December, things had officially spiraled out of control. Lisa was no longer content to sulk in private or throw passive-aggressive texts my way. She was now on a full-blown mission to drag my name through the mud with anyone who would listen. I was honestly getting whiplashed trying to keep up with all her stunts. It started small. My cousin Grace, bless her for being the family informant, told me that Lisa had been calling up relatives to warn them about me. According to her, I was flaunting my wedding in her face to deliberately humiliate her. She even claimed I deliberately chose March, knowing it would be too soon after her divorce for her to emotionally handle it. I couldn't wrap my head around the logic. My engagement had been set months before she even got married, let alone divorced. How was I supposed to predict her life would fall apart when I was sending out save the dates? But logic doesn't matter much when someone's determined to play the victim. Her stories got more dramatic with each retelling. Grace told me Lisa was saying things like, Jennifer always thinks she's better than me, and she's just rubbing her perfect little life in my face because she knows I'm struggling. The worst part? Some family members actually bought into her narrative. Mom, of course, was her biggest cheerleader. She started calling me almost daily to ask if I had reconsidered canceling or scaling back the wedding. "Lisa's still so fragile," she'd say. "She cried all night after seeing your wedding invitations. You really don't need a big event. Can't you just do something simple?" I stood firm every single time, but it was exhausting to constantly defend my right to have the wedding I wanted. The real breaking point came at a family gathering during Christmas. Daniel and I had been invited to a dinner at my aunt's house. I thought it would be nice to decompress after all the wedding stress. Of course, Lisa and Mom were there too, which should have been my first red flag. Things were tense from the start. Lisa barely acknowledged me, but every time I mentioned anything about the wedding, she'd huff or roll her eyes. At one point, I was chatting with my aunt about flowers, and Lisa loudly muttered, "Must be nice to waste so much money on a party when some people can barely pick up the pieces of their lives." I ignored her, but it was obvious she wanted a reaction. Eventually, the conversation shifted to other topics, and I started to relax a bit. That is, until Lisa suddenly burst into tears in the middle of the living room. She was full-on sobbing, shaking her head and muttering, "I can't believe how cruel people can be." Everyone froze. My aunt rushed over to comfort her, asking what was wrong. That's when Lisa launched into her performance. "It's just so hard," she said through her tears. "I've been through so much this year, and now I have to sit here and listen to Jen talk about her perfect wedding like nothing else matters. She knows how much pain I'm in, but she doesn't care." And Mom chimed in immediately, rubbing Lisa's back like she was the victim of some terrible injustice. "She's right, Jennifer," Mom added. "You need to be more considerate. You have no idea how hard this has been for her." That's when I lost it. I had been holding my tongue for weeks, but I couldn't take it anymore. "This wedding has nothing to do with Lisa," I said, trying to stay calm. "Daniel and I have been planning this for a year. If she's upset, that's not my fault. Maybe she should take some responsibility for rushing into a bad marriage instead of blaming me for her problems." The room went dead silent. My aunt looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch. Lisa's tears immediately turned to rage. "How dare you!" she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to have your life fall apart. You've had everything handed to you, your scholarship, your boyfriend, your perfect little life. You've never had to struggle for anything." I stood up, shaking with anger. "You're right, Lisa. I don't know what it's like to have my life fall apart. But that's because I don't make impulsive decisions just to compete with other people. Maybe if you spent less time being bitter and more time working on yourself, you wouldn't be in this situation." At that point, Daniel grabbed my hand. "We're leaving," he said firmly. I didn't argue. On the drive home, I kept replaying the conversation in my head, second-guessing whether I'd been too harsh. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had every right to stand up for myself. Lisa had been pushing me for weeks. I was done letting her turn my wedding into her pity party. What really stuck with me, though, was how Mom had jumped to Lisa's defense without hesitation. Not once did she try to understand my side, or even acknowledge how much stress this whole situation was causing me. It felt like she had chosen her favorite, and it wasn't me. The next day, I got a text from Mom. "You owe your sister an apology for what you said last night. She's been through so much, and you were unnecessarily cruel." I didn't reply. I was done apologizing for things that weren't my fault. By this point, it was clear that Lisa wasn't going to back down, and Mom wasn't going to stop enabling her. I didn't know what their next move would be, but I knew I had to start preparing for the worst. It's time for an update. After the disaster at the family dinner, I knew I had to draw a hard line. Lisa and Mom weren't just being unreasonable. They were actively trying to sabotage my happiness. Ignoring it clearly wasn't working, and every attempt to defend myself just seemed to fuel their drama. I realized the only way to move forward was to completely shut them out of the wedding. That decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. 2 days after the dinner, I sat down with Daniel and laid everything out. "I think I need to uninvite them," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "They're just going to make things worse if they're there." Daniel nodded immediately. "I've been thinking the same thing," he replied. "It sucks, but this is your day, our day, and you deserve to enjoy it without worrying about their next move." Hearing his support made me feel better, but the thought of actually cutting off my mom and sister from my wedding was daunting. It wasn't just about them. It was about the ripple effect it might have on the rest of the family. Still, I knew I couldn't let their toxic behavior overshadow everything Daniel and I had worked so hard to plan, so I drafted an email. I kept it short and factual, explaining that their actions over the past few months, spreading rumors, guilt-tripping me, and creating unnecessary drama, had made it clear they weren't supportive of my wedding. I told them that their behavior had caused me significant stress, and for my own peace of mind, I had decided to uninvite them. I hit send, and immediately felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Within hours, the responses started rolling in. Mom was the first to reply, and let me tell you, it was a doozy. She called me cold-hearted and accused me of tearing the family apart. Her email was filled with dramatic phrases like, "I never thought my own daughter would betray me like this," and "You've chosen a man over your own blood." She even threw in a line about how my dad would be disappointed in me if he were still alive. Classic guilt trip tactics. I didn't reply. Next came Lisa's response, exactly what I expected, full of anger and self-pity. She accused me of being jealous of her, still not sure what I'm supposed to be jealous of, and claimed I was punishing her for being honest about her feelings. She ended her email with, "You'll regret this when you realize you've destroyed this family." I didn't reply to her either. The fallout didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I started getting calls and texts from other family members, mostly the ones Mom and Lisa had already poisoned against me. My uncle called to tell me I was being immature and should just let it go for the sake of family harmony. A cousin I barely speak to left a voicemail saying, "I can't believe you do something like this to your own mother." At first, I felt overwhelmed by the backlash, but then something amazing happened. The people who actually mattered started showing up for me. My dad's sister, Aunt Charlotte, called me to say she was proud of me for standing up for myself. "You've put up with their nonsense for long enough," she said. "It's about time you put your foot down." My cousin Grace, who'd been keeping me updated on Lisa's antics, sent me a long text saying, "Don't let them get to you. Everyone who really knows you is on your side." Even my godmother, who's one of the most no-nonsense people I know, called to tell me I was doing the right thing. "Your wedding should be about love and celebration, not drama and bitterness," she said. Their support was like a balm for my soul. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. But of course, Mom and Lisa weren't going to let it go quietly. About a week after I sent the email, I got another call from Grace. "You're not going to believe this," she said, sounding both amused and annoyed. "Lisa's telling people you uninvited her because you're threatened by her." I couldn't help but laugh. "Threatened by what exactly?" "Apparently she's been saying I'm worried Daniel has feelings for her. She claims he's been flirting with her, and I found out, so I'm trying to get rid of her to save face." It was so ridiculous that I didn't even know how to respond. We both knew there was zero truth to anything she was saying, but it was infuriating that she was trying to drag Daniel into her web of lies. "That's just desperate," I said. "No one's going to believe that." "Honestly, most people don't," Grace replied. "But you know how she is. She's going to keep spinning the story until she finds someone gullible enough to take her side." I decided not to waste any more energy worrying about Lisa's delusions. At this point, I was focused on protecting my peace and making sure my wedding day went off without a hitch. To that end, Daniel and I sat down together to go over the guest list and finalize all the details. I reached out to the venue to make sure they had our backs in case Lisa or Mom tried to pull anything. I also hired a couple of security guards to keep things under control, something I never thought I'd have to do for my own wedding. But here we were. Through it all, Daniel was my rock. He kept reminding me that this was our day, and that we didn't owe anyone an explanation for protecting our happiness. By the time February rolled around, I felt like I was finally regaining control. Lisa and Mom could spin their narratives all they wanted, but they weren't going to ruin this for me. A few weeks later, something happened that I absolutely need to tell you about immediately. If you thought Lisa's antics couldn't get any worse, buckle up, because this one takes the cake. By the time February rolled around, I thought I'd seen every shade of her jealousy, pettiness, and downright manipulative behavior. But what she tried to pull next left me absolutely floored, and honestly a little disgusted. It all started with a weird text Daniel got one evening. We were sitting on the couch, finally relaxing after a stressful day of finalizing wedding details, when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I noticed his face immediately go from relaxed to tense. "What is it?" I asked, already bracing myself for drama. "It's Lisa," he said, showing me the message. The text read, "Hey Daniel, I really need someone to talk to. I know you probably think I'm a terrible person right now, but I'm really struggling, and I feel like you're the only one who understands. Can we meet up? At first, I didn't know how to react. I mean, on the surface, it seemed innocent enough, but knowing Lisa and knowing how hard she'd been working to cause problems, I had a bad feeling. Daniel must have sensed it too because he didn't reply right away. Instead, he turned to me and said, "I don't like this. It feels off." "Because it is off," I replied. "She's never even liked you. Why would she suddenly want to talk to you about her feelings?" We agreed it was best to ignore her, but the messages kept coming over the next few days. She sent Daniel a string of increasingly desperate texts. She talked about how lonely she felt, how she had no one else to turn to, and how much she appreciated his kindness during such a difficult time. Let me remind you, Daniel had never had any kind of meaningful conversation with Lisa. He'd always been polite to her, of course, but they weren't close by any stretch of the imagination. So this sudden outpouring of gratitude felt calculated and deeply suspicious. Daniel was as creeped out as I was, but we both decided it was better to wait and see what her endgame was before responding. And sure enough, it didn't take long for her true intentions to come to light. Later that week, Daniel got another message, and this one was so blatant it made my blood boil. Lisa wrote, "I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. I feel like we have a connection that Jennifer doesn't understand. I don't know what to do with these feelings." I was absolutely furious, not just at her for being so brazen, but also at the sheer disrespect of it all. She knew we were getting married in a matter of days, and here she was, trying to wedge herself between us with some cheap tricks. Daniel, bless him, immediately showed me the message and asked, "How do you want to handle this?" I took a deep breath and said, "Let's not give her the satisfaction of a direct response. Block her number. But before you do, take screenshots of everything." He did exactly that. And we kept the screenshots as receipts, just in case she decided to try spinning some wild narrative later. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. I didn't respond to her directly. There was no point in engaging with someone so desperate for attention. But I did send an email to my mom and a few other close family members laying out what had happened. I kept it straightforward, attaching the screenshots and explaining that this was the proof that I was right to uninvite Lisa from the wedding. "This behavior is toxic and manipulative," I wrote. "I've done everything I can to keep the peace, but this crosses a line. And I hope now you understand why I excluded her before." The responses were mixed. Mom, predictably, came to Lisa's defense. She claimed I must have misunderstood her intentions and that I was blowing things out of proportion. She even had the nerve to suggest that Daniel might have misread the messages. "I can't believe you'd accuse your own sister of something so horrible," Mom wrote. "Lisa's just going through a tough time, and you're making it all about you." I rolled my eyes so hard I almost sprained something. At this point, I wasn't even surprised by Mom's reaction. But other family members were much more supportive. Grace called me immediately after reading the email. "Are you serious?" she said. "I knew Lisa was a piece of work, but this is next level. Good for you for cutting her off." My dad's sister, Aunt Charlotte, was just as outraged. "You're absolutely right to keep her out of the wedding," she said. "She's proven time and again that she doesn't respect you, and this just confirms it. Their support meant the world to me. But I'd be lying if I said it completely erased the hurt. Lisa's stunt wasn't just disrespectful. It was humiliating. It felt like she was trying to undermine everything Daniel and I had built together, and I couldn't understand why. Was it jealousy? Spite? Some twisted need for attention? Maybe all of the above. Whatever her reasons, I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to win. With just a few days left until the wedding, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't let Lisa or Mom ruin this for me. I also made sure to double down on security measures for the big day. I reached out to the venue, gave them a heads up about the situation, letting them know Lisa and Mom were explicitly uninvited. I even hired an extra security guard, just in case they decided to show up anyway. It felt a little extreme, but after everything they'd pulled, I wasn't taking any chances. Now, I feel more prepared than ever to face whatever nonsense they might try to throw my way. Lisa's dirty tricks might have shaken me, but they didn't break me. If anything, they only made me more determined to stand my ground and protect my peace. Time for another update, hopefully the last time you'll hear about my family drama. Let me tell you, I thought I had prepared myself for every possible scenario leading up to my wedding. But nothing quite prepares you for the moment when your own family tries to sabotage the happiest day of your life. The morning of the wedding started beautifully. The venue looked magical with all the flowers and decorations we'd picked out over the past year. The weather was perfect for our ceremony, and my bridesmaids kept me laughing and relaxed while we got ready. Daniel and I had agreed to do a first look before the ceremony, so once I was dressed, I stepped outside to meet him in the garden. The second I saw him standing there, looking every bit as nervous and excited as I felt, all the stress and drama melted away. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, and nothing else mattered. Or so I thought. About 30 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, I was back in the bridal suite doing some last-minute touch-ups when my maid of honor, Amanda, came rushing in. She looked flustered, which immediately set off alarm bells. "You're not going to believe this," she said, breathless. "Lisa and your mom are here." My stomach dropped. "What? How? I thought security was handling it." "They're trying to get in," Amanda explained. "Security stopped them at the gate, but they're causing a huge scene." Of course they were. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What are they saying?" Amanda hesitated, which told me it wasn't good. "Your mom's crying and saying she just wants to see her daughter get married. Lisa's, well, she's screaming about how you're a horrible person and how you don't deserve this day." I felt my blood start to boil. It wasn't enough for them to make the months leading up to the wedding a nightmare. They had to try to ruin the actual day, too. "What do you want me to do?" Amanda asked, looking concerned. "Nothing," I said firmly. "Let security handle it. If we go out there, it's just going to give them what they want." Amanda nodded and left to check in with the guards. Meanwhile, I sat down and tried to collect myself. I could hear Mom and Lisa faintly in the distance, shouting and arguing with security. It took everything in me not to march out there and give them a piece of my mind. A few minutes later, Amanda came back with an update. "They're refusing to leave. The venue manager offered to call the police, but they're worried it'll cause an even bigger scene." I groaned. This was exactly why I'd uninvited them in the first place. "Do you want me to tell Daniel?" Amanda asked. I shook my head. "No, he doesn't need this stress right now. Just make sure they don't get anywhere near the ceremony." Thankfully, security was on top of it. They managed to keep Mom and Lisa contained to the parking lot. Eventually, the venue staff called a ride service to take them away, but not before Lisa shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You'll regret this, Jennifer! You'll regret cutting out your own family!" Once they were gone, I took another deep breath and told myself to let it go. They were out of sight now, and I wasn't going to let them steal my joy. The ceremony itself was everything I dreamed of and more. Standing up there with Daniel, surrounded by our closest friends and family, the supportive ones at least, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. This was what mattered. Not the drama, not the bitterness, just this moment with the people who truly cared about us. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I started hearing bits and pieces about what had gone down with Mom and Lisa. Apparently, they'd been shouting accusations at the security guards, saying I was brainwashed by Daniel and that the family would never forgive me for excluding them. A few guests even overheard them from the parking lot, which was embarrassing, but most people just rolled their eyes and brushed it off. My dad's sister, Aunt Charlotte, came up to me during dinner and said, "I'm so proud of you for standing your ground. They showed their true colors today, and everyone sees it now." That was a common sentiment throughout the night. Cousins, friends, even some of Mom's old friends pulled me aside to tell me they were on my side. It felt like a collective reckoning. People finally realized how toxic Mom and Lisa had been, and they weren't having it. The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter, dancing, and pure joy. Daniel and I shared our first dance under twinkling lights. My maid of honor gave a hilarious and heartfelt toast, and my dad's best friend, who's practically an uncle to me, brought the house down with a story about how he once caught Daniel trying to sneak out of a family barbecue with a plate of ribs. By the time the night ended, I felt lighter than I had in months. Lisa and Mom hadn't won. Their attempts to ruin the day had only highlighted how much love and support Daniel and I had from the people who actually mattered. When I got back to the hotel that night, I checked my phone and saw I had a dozen missed calls and texts from Mom. I didn't bother reading them. I was done letting her or Lisa take up space in my life. Cutting them out completely was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. But standing there with Daniel, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, I knew it was the right one. About a week after the wedding, I got a call from Grace, who, as usual, was the first to deliver the family gossip. "You're not going to believe what just happened," she said, sounding way more excited than concerned. I sighed. "What now?" "Lisa and your mom had a huge fight," Grace said. "Like epic level fight. And get this, your mom kicked her out of the house." I almost dropped my phone. Wait, what? What happened? Grace was more than happy to fill me in. Apparently, after the wedding, Lisa had been sulking around Mom's house, stewing over the fact that her grand plan to ruin my day had failed. According to Grace, she was blaming everyone. Me, Daniel, the security guards, even some random cousin who apparently didn't try hard enough to stop me. The real explosion happened when Lisa turned on Mom. Lisa accused her of not doing enough to stop the wedding. She started screaming about how it was Mom's fault that I'd gone through with it, that Mom should have been more forceful in convincing me to cancel. Mom, who has always coddled Lisa no matter how ridiculous she's been, finally hit her breaking point. Grace said Mom yelled back, telling Lisa she was tired of the drama and that she was an adult who needed to take responsibility for her own life. Lisa didn't take that well. She apparently went on a full-blown rant, accusing Mom of failing her as a parent and choosing me over her. It got so bad that Mom finally told her to pack her things and leave. When Grace told me all this, I couldn't help but laugh. Not because I thought it was funny, but because of the sheer irony of it all. After months of Mom defending Lisa and taking her side, it all came back to bite her. She really kicked her out? I asked, still trying to process it. Yep, Grace said. Lisa's staying with a friend for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if she comes crawling back in a few weeks. The whole situation felt like karma in action. In the end, their toxicity turned inward, and they ended up taking it out on each other. I wish I could say I felt bad for either of them, but honestly, I didn't. After everything they put me through, it felt like poetic justice. As for me, I'm done with both of them. I've blocked their numbers, muted them on social media, and made it clear to the rest of the family that I'm not interested in hearing about their latest antics. Daniel and I are focusing on starting this new chapter of our lives together, and I couldn't be happier. This whole experience taught me something important. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who support you, who respect your choices, and who want to see you happy. Mom and Lisa might be related to me, but they're not my family. Not in the ways that matter. My real family was there on my wedding day. The friends who helped me stay calm when Mom and Lisa showed up. The relatives who stood by me when others bought into their lies. And most importantly, my husband, who never once wavered in his support. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is to cut toxic people out of your life, even if they're related to you. It's not easy, and there will always be people who don't understand, who think you should forgive and forget for the sake of family. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for your mental health and happiness. I don't know if Mom and Lisa will ever change, or if we'll ever have any kind of relationship again. Part of me is sad about that. They are my family, after all. But a bigger part of me feels relieved. For the first time in a long time, I'm not walking on eggshells, not dreading the next dramatic text or call, not feeling guilty for living my life the way I want to. Daniel and I are talking about buying a house, maybe starting a family of our own in the next few years. I want to create the kind of loving, supportive home I always wished I had growing up. A place where people are celebrated for their achievements, not punished for them. Where love isn't conditional or competitive. When I look back at all the drama now, it almost seems surreal. Like a bad movie rather than my actual life. But it happened. And in a strange way, I'm grateful for it. It showed me who I can really count on. And it gave me the courage to stand up for myself in a way I never had before. So here's to new beginnings, to chosen family, and to never letting anyone dim your light. Especially not the people who should be the ones helping it shine brighter. Has anyone else had to cut off toxic family members? How did you handle the fallout? Sometimes I still question if I made the right call, but then I remember the peace I feel now and know it was worth it.